Murder by Medic S04E06 delves into one of the most shocking and unsettling criminal cases in German history, unmasking the hidden dangers that can lurk behind the trusted walls of healthcare institutions. The episode is centered on the arrest, revelation, and eventual conviction of Niels Hogel, an intensive care nurse responsible for what is widely considered the largest series of murders in post-war German criminal history, with suspicions that he murdered over 100 patients and potentially up to 200. Through interviews, expert commentary, and careful reconstruction, the documentary paints a detailed picture of how such crimes could go undetected for so long, the psychology of the perpetrator, the failures of institutional oversight, and the devastating impact on families and communities. The story opens with the resonance of a gavel, signifying the gravity and magnitude of Hogel's trial, echoed by expert voices who describe it as Germany's most serious murder case since World War II. The scale of the crimes seems impossible to comprehend, intensifying the question. How could someone trained to save lives systematically take them, and how could it go unnoticed in supposedly secure hospital environments? Set in the small German town of Delmenhorst, population 70,000, nestled between Bremen and Oldenburg, the narrative closely follows police and medical professionals as they recount the alarming series of events. Arne Schmidt, vice president of the Oldenburg police, contextualizes the setting, a town with 2 hospitals, one municipal and one Catholic. At this time, these were close-knit environments where staff knew each other, and changes or suspicions would be expected to draw attention. The pivotal incident occurs with the near death of a patient named Dieter, whose circulation had collapsed. The details of this event are meticulously narrated, with Dr. Sarah Jarvis, a general practitioner, providing medical context. Several nurses rush into Dieter's room to find the life support equipment switched off, a clear breach of protocol, as such machines are crucial for patients in critical condition. Niels Hogel is observed in the room behaving oddly. He stands in shock at the end of the bed, offering no explanation for his presence. Suspicion grows when, following resuscitation efforts, a nurse discovers empty ampoules of Adjmalin, the antiarrhythmic drug known in the hospital as Gileuritmal, in the garbage. Adjmalin is rarely used except in treating specific heart rhythm disorders. In the wrong context or to the wrong patients, such as Dieter, it can fatally slow the heart, making its presence especially suspicious. Hospital staff check the storage and confirm the unaccounted Gileuritmal. Blood tests on Dieter, who should not have received the drug, confirm its presence in his system. Nurses quickly escalate their concerns to superiors, setting an investigation into motion. Yet, hospital management is notably slow to react. More astonishingly, Hogel is allowed to continue working the next 2 days, providing further opportunities for wrongdoing. These early details starkly frame the episode's exploration of institutional failure, a recurring and damning theme. When eventually confronted by hospital administration and the police, a search of Hogel's locker reveals medicines not authorized for a nurse to keep. Police are formally contacted on July 1, 2005, and Hogel's employment is terminated. During police interrogation, Hogel presents himself as well-intentioned, claiming that he administered the drug to alleviate what he described as Dieter's rapid heartbeat, ostensibly to help. He insists this was the first and only time he had acted in such a way. However, this assertion comes under increasing scrutiny, not only because it does not explain the switched-off equipment or his suspicious behavior, but because it conflicts with emerging evidence and the growing list of patient deaths under his care. The episode devotes significant attention to Hogel's background, painting the portrait of someone outwardly ordinary. Born in Wilhelmshaven in 1976 into a stable household, his father a nurse, mother a homemaker, father active in local politics, he excelled at school and had normal childhood aspirations. The family's eventual split when he was 11 is noted as a significant moment, but nothing in his formative years suggests the monster he would become. During nursing school, he enjoys the social scene, indulges in parties, and manages to graduate without distinction. When he begins working at the prestigious Oldenburg Clinic, especially known for cardiac surgery, he is well-liked, known for making jokes, and considered competent in emergencies. However, some colleagues note his arrogance, and, most notably, his apparent eagerness to be present for high-stakes emergencies and resuscitations. This pattern of wanting to be the hero in life-or-death situations emerges as a key psychological theme in understanding his actions. Experts in investigative psychology like Professor Donna Youngs and physicians comment on what might have driven Hogel. The consensus is not hatred or malice but a desperate need to prove himself, to feel powerful, and perhaps to win admiration by orchestrating crises and then saving patients. The desire for heroic recognition is mingled with deep emotional immaturity and a lack of empathy. The show suggests that Hogel's upbringing, marked by security and perhaps subtle expectations of perfection, may have resulted in a man who needed to stand out, to invent his own life and death theater in the hospital, and to exercise absolute power over vulnerable people. Despite accumulating concerns, institutional inertia prevents action. Odd feelings among staff go unreported or unaddressed, and when Hogel leaves the Oldenburg hospital, he does so with glowing references, thus enabling his transfer to Delmenhorst and granting him fresh opportunity for abuse. This bureaucratic and cultural reluctance to confront or escalate suspicions is woven throughout the narrative, highlighting the danger of institutional silence. Returning to the present-day case, the show details how Hogel's initial conviction was for attempted manslaughter, not murder, resulting in a 5-year sentence and a 5-year professional ban. During appeals and subsequent legal maneuvering, Hogel is even briefly released while the case is under review, a stark reminder of the limitations and slowness of the legal system in the face of complex serial crimes. During this interval, the case remains largely unremarked upon in the national press, and most people, even journalists in the region, know little of the details. The turning point arrives not through official action but the persistence of an ordinary citizen. Catherine Lohman, whose mother Bridget had died suddenly in Delmenhorst years before, reads a news report about the nurse's trial and becomes suspicious. Bridget had been on the mend and expecting to be discharged, only to die unexpectedly after a cryptic, unsettling phone call from a male nurse. Unsettled, Catherine reports this to police. Investigators confirm that Hogel was on duty the night her mother died. A post-mortem is ordered, but the detection of adrenaline is complicated by time and the drug's fast metabolism, underscoring the difficulty of gathering toxicological evidence long after burial. With toxicological testing of exhumed remains, investigators are able to link adrenaline to more deaths. This discovery prompts the exhumation of 8 more bodies, of which 4 are found to have been poisoned by the same drug. These forensic breakthroughs, alongside mounting circumstantial evidence, catapult the case into a new phase. A new prosecutor pursues murder charges, and the press finally begins to cover the unfolding disaster. Hogel is indicted for 5 murders, but as more evidence emerges, including his own confessions, the true scale becomes visible. What follows is a chilling account of method and opportunity. Hogel's routine, as reconstructed, is both calculated and haunting. He would inject patients with adrenaline or other deadly drugs, switch off their monitoring equipment, wait until the situation deteriorated, and then rush in to resuscitate, attempting to play the hero. Sometimes he succeeded in reviving patients. Often he did not. The prescribed medications, adrenaline, lidocaine, potassium, sotalol, were all easy to access within the hospital due to lax security at the time, further enabling his crimes. The hospital's lack of strict controls or even basic tracking of medicine inventory is as much a culprit as Hogel himself, according to the show's analysis. Statistical analysis of patient deaths and resuscitation cements suspicions. The mortality rate and frequency of incidents spike dramatically when Hogel is on duty, only to drop to normal when he is sick or on leave. This is most evident during the so-called Black Weekend in Oldenburg, when Hogel returns from a 3-week illness and 5 patients require life-saving measures in 3 days, a spike seen nowhere else in the records. As the investigation widens, police must grapple with the logistical nightmare of tracking potential victims across 64 cemeteries, dealing compassionately with bereaved families and piecing together records sometimes years out of date. In-depth forensic work, cross-referencing hospital shift records, medication usage spikes, and autopsy reports, produces an ever-expanding list of probable and possible victims. The documentation is overwhelming, mounting into tens of thousands of pages. The courts, prosecutors, and police all grapple with the sorrowful magnitude, substantial enough that in U.S.-style sentencing it would equate to more than a millennium behind bars. Throughout, the emotional and psychological impact is explored. The show underlines the horror felt by the local community and by the German public at the enormity of what occurred. The failure of courage among Hogel's colleagues and superiors, the polite evasion, the avoidance of scandal, the delayed reporting, all are castigated in hindsight as facilitating more deaths. Even when suspicion reached a point where Hogel was being removed from his post in cardiac surgery, the solution was to quietly transfer him elsewhere, rather than confront the real danger or notify authorities, exposing systemic flaws in healthcare governance. The trial that eventually follows is monumental. The largest in German post-war history, held in a massive venue, attended by more than 400 people, and closely followed by international media. The scale of the accusations is staggering, with Hogel facing more than 100 murder charges, the reading of which alone takes hours. Experts assert that truly understanding how so many murders could be perpetrated in a hospital setting, not at once but over years, requires confronting deep flaws not only in personal morality but also in institutional culture. During the trial, Hogel vacillates in his testimony, offering partial admissions only when incontrovertible forensic evidence is produced. Initially, he limits himself to crimes committed in Delmenhorst, denying wrongdoing at Oldenburg. Gradually, as investigators marshal more facts against him, including the growing association between his shifts and patient deaths across two hospitals, he more or less stops cooperating, or responds with evasion and indifference. He ultimately confesses to 30 murders and 60 attempted murders, but the real number is suspected to be much higher. Crucially, the show explores the ambiguity around Hogel's motivation. Was he a psychopathic killer seeking death for its own sake, or an emotionally stunted individual obsessed with being seen as a hero, who began by playing with life and death and ended by simply killing people? Expert opinions portrayed in the episode suggest a process of escalation. Initially, he may have sought to engineer emergency situations to prove his skill, or even save lives, but as time went on, the boundary erodes and murder becomes the aim, not merely the byproduct. In a profound thematic sense, this ambiguity parallels broader mysteries about the nature of evil in mundane settings. Hogel is not the archetypal monster. He is not rage-fueled, driven by ideology or clear delusions. The episode posits that the true danger in settings like hospitals is the individual whose psychological needs are invisible, whose outward face is ordinary, and whose social integration enables them to evade suspicion. The power imbalance between caregiver and vulnerable patient, combined with gaps in institutional oversight, creates the perfect cover. The systemic issues of these crimes are constantly underlined. At each stage, from co-worker suspicions to hospital management's inaction, to delayed police reporting and failures of communication between institutions and families, every breakdown is a missed opportunity to protect the next victim. When Hogel is finally removed from one hospital, another takes him in based on a glowing reference, and the death toll rises. Even when medication usage spikes are noticed, the hospital consults lawyers rather than law enforcement, indicating a preference for protecting institutional reputation over human lives. The ending of the episode is emotionally charged and intellectually sobering. On the penultimate day of trial, Hogel offers an apology to the victims' relatives, one that rings hollow both to the families and the professionals present. He appears to lack any comprehension of the loss he inflicted, his apology likened to that of a child caught raiding the cookie jar, rather than one who has destroyed dozens of families. This lack of effect, a kind of emotional void, matches the expert's earlier psychological profiles and underscores the ultimate incomprehensibility of his crimes. The sentencing is massive. Hogel receives life imprisonment for 85 murders, though 15 charges remain technically unproven due to evidentiary limitations. The judge, seasoned in criminal law, admits that the scope of Hogel's crimes surpasses his own capacity for understanding, referencing how in the American justice system, his crimes would warrant more than 1,200 consecutive years behind bars. The implication is that no mere sentence could truly balance the ledger or bring satisfactory closure to so many bereaved. Reflecting on the aftermath, the documentary highlights the enduring trauma for the region, the world of healthcare, and the German public. There are bitter lessons in the story, never to take things at face value and always to scrutinize the facts, especially when unsuspecting lives are at risk. The episode calls for rigor in oversight, open channels for whistleblowers, and a cultural shift away from protecting institutional image at the expense of truth and safety. Thematically, Murder by Medic S04E06 is a story about power and trust, how the position of caregiver contains the potential for tremendous good or unexpected evil. The serial killer here is not the outcast but the insider, the person trusted with privilege and access, who exploits the institutional comfort of hospitals and the reluctance of staff to voice suspicions. It lays bare how the patterns of deference, miscommunication, and bureaucratic inertia all contribute to creating an environment where the unthinkable can persist for years. Comparing this case to similar works in the genre, such as dramatizations of real-life hospital murders and classic accounts of trusted killers like Dr. Harold Shipman in the UK, or more fictional classics like Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the episode stands out for its careful, almost clinical scrutiny of the mundane. The terrors here are not from external violence but hidden in routine, covered over by layers of bureaucracy, and only exposed by the relentless accumulation of evidence and the persistence of ordinary people, nurses, detectives, and grieving relatives. The symbolism in the episode is subtle but potent. The hospital, symbol of hope, healing, and safety, becomes, in this story, a place of hidden horror, its trust betrayed from within. The trusted nurse, emblem of care, is recast as an instrument of death, a chilling inversion of his sworn duty. The empty ampoules of Ajmalin discarded in a waste bin become the smallest clues to the greatest of evils. Foreshadowing is woven throughout as strange feelings and behavioral oddities go unheeded, only to be retroactively understood as warning signs. The notion of looking twice, advocated by police and commentators at the episode's close, acts as a motif for perpetual vigilance, for the necessity of skepticism even against trusted appearances. In the closing moments, the audience is left with a sense of ongoing loss and open-endedness. No matter how many cases are proven, others cannot be, due to cremation or lost records. Hogel's real toll may never be known, and the systemic failures that enabled him could be present elsewhere, unless lessons are properly learned. Thus, the ending of Murder by Medic S04E06 is not simply about the punishment of an individual, but a powerful, harrowing meditation on the vulnerability of institutions, the ambiguity of evil, and the eternal need for honesty and courage in confronting wrongdoing. In this sense, the episode transcends true crime to become a warning and a call to action, a reminder that the greatest dangers may come not from monsters lurking in the shadows, but from those in plain sight, who are trusted, who fit in, and whose evil only becomes clear when it is far too late.